Hey Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nick. How are you?
Fantastic. It is clearly podcast season outside. It's
It
gloomy, it's
is.
getting cold. No
It
place I'd
is.
rather be
That's
than
right.
podcasting
That's
here with
right.
you.
At least it's a Friday. We're back to our normal schedule.
It is indeed a Friday, and we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Shane Topping, who is a senior at Michigan State University. Did I get that right, Shane?
Yes,
Yep.
correct.
And
Good.
one of the glorious interns at Shotwell Rutter Baer, who has got a couple weeks left here with us, and then on to bigger and better things, I'm sure. So, Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so I know we're going to talk a little bit about your internship experience, and then we really wanted to. This is actually your topic, your show. So I'll start asking you questions and stop talking here in a minute. But we wanted to talk about like what happens when you graduate, like what kind of financial advice do you
Yeah.
give your friends and yourself, and you can even get pick Dave and my brains on what we wish we knew back then, right?
Right. Right.
So, without further ado, Shane, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an intern here at SRB and how that's been going.
Yeah, so as Nick said, I'm a senior at Michigan State studying finance and in the financial planning and wealth management minor program. And how I discovered you guys was actually when me and you met, Nick, when you came into my class and talked about your firm. And what caught my eye was you guys, the way that you guys bill is quite interesting to me, which I thought at the time,
Yeah.
uh, with the flat fee and not the percentage fee. So then we spoke afterwards and just kind of emailed back and forth, and then obviously you emailed me that you guys had opened an internship position, and the rest is kind of history. So
Yeah.
I've been
Love
I've
that.
been
Before you go on, Shane, I'd be
Mhm.
remiss if I didn't stop and just to say, Dave, if I've saved one, if I've inspired
I
one, I
know.
feel like my job here is done.
I know, right? We've made our mark on the planet. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No, you're all set. So you
Cool.
guys
And
could get
so you've been interning at SRB. What's like your one or two takeaways of working in a small fee only RIA that you learned so far?
um one or two big takeaways. I'd say working in a smaller RA is definitely the capabilities to pivot and make change within the business. I
Mm,
find is quite astronomical in a smaller business because we have team meetings. We just got off a team meeting with our outsourced investment officer, and since the team's only 7 or 8 people, we can pivot and change and make changes quite quickly if you know we see
yeah.
so, versus at a bigger firm you have to go through upper management and stuff like that, and
Right.
those things just lag. So I think that's definitely a benefit of having less people, but obviously there's pros and cons.
Well, the con is that it can be terrifying too, but that's a topic for another podcast.
Yes, it can. But I'm glad you picked up on that because that is one thing, where you basically, especially as an intern, I'm sure like you are in the room with all the people that are making the decisions and you get to see in real time, like, hey, we're going to make a change. We're going to do something different. And that's pretty cool from that level. I remember, being in your shoes and working for bigger firms. And that's not, we didn't even know what was happening in that room, let alone
Yeah.
like watching it. Right.
I had an interesting experience at a conference last week talking to a software developer who was like, "Yeah, this is my target audience because if I try to like start my new software, particular thing he was launching at, one of the huge established banks, sure it'd be great if they accept it, but it's going to be 5 years before they make a decision."
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're kind of proud of that.
That's a great point. One of the things of going out on my own in 2015 and obviously coming here in 2019 is like the technology that we have access to. They're years away from rolling that out in some of the
Right.
bigger firms.
Right. Which a lot of people, I think the average person out there, the average consumer would probably think it's the opposite.
Right? Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. hmm So, with that
And
being said, Mr. Shane, did you have something else you wanted to add there?
yeah, and I wanted to say to add on to that, with newer technology coming out, um, I'm not sure, Nick, did you sit in when we went to FPA event in Grand Rapids? Did you sit in the breakout session with the AI?
I was not in that one. You were supposed to take
Okay.
notes for me in that
I
one,
think,
remember?
yeah, I
Right.
think I need to share those notes with you. But like, and even moving forward with technology, it's probably to your advantage being a smaller firm to be able to play around with these newer
Mm,
technologies versus in a bigger firm or corporate branch, you know, you might not be able, you have to wait and get approval and stuff like that, and then they have
Right.
to check out the back end, whereas you guys could be like, oh, what probably our conversation next is going to be, Nick, is, oh, look at these 3 apps that I found at a conference. Let's,
right.
do some research and try and roll them out. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, working in a bigger firm and the experience is, the first answer is always no, and usually the second one too. Right? Like change something new, and that's not happening,
Yeah.
right?
The third
So
is
it is
not
definitely a
now.
different
Yeah.
feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fourth is only because we have to, or we're going to
Right.
fall
Yeah.
behind, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Too
So
funny.
good. Good.
Um, so that being said, I know we wanted to talk today, and you actually put together some thoughtful notes here of just some general conversation around, hey, I'm in my early 20s, going to graduate from college. Like, how does that relate to financial planning? What are some of the things that I should be thinking about? So I'm curious, kind of take us through what your thought process is there, and some of the knowledge that you wish that your cohort would have
Yeah.
getting ready for graduation here in the spring.
yeah. So I will say this, but it will be brief because I feel like everyone always talks about it, but it is, super important. Just the power of compounding, the power of
Mm-hmm.
starting, as young as you can, because those later years it starts to go vertical in terms of the growth. So I just pulled some numbers together about the difference between 22, starting at 22, 25, 30, and 35. Just kind of wanted to touch on this briefly, and only briefly because I feel like everyone kind of says it. And something that I wanted to talk on more in depth was kind of just the 3 different buckets of investment slash retirement accounts, the pros and cons of each, and then kind of the importance of financial flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because in your 20s and 30s, you want to purchase things, you want to, buy the house,
Hmm.
maybe have a wedding, and if you want to have kids, then have kids. And these are certain situations where like they're going to cost a lot of money. So if you have all your money locked up in a certain account or something and you can't really access it without paying fees and other taxes, then it would be to your benefit. So yeah.
Yeah, I will never forget when and funny story about my education is that I was probably a junior in the business school in the finance track before I had a professor who like sat down and was like, "Hey, you should put your money in a Roth IRA. If you start now, this is how much money you'll
Right.
have at retirement." And it's like that was the first time it dawned on me like I can be a millionaire, and B, how easy it seemed based on what those numbers were because of compound interest. Obviously, I wish that that probably would have happened my freshman year, but I'm grateful that I got it my junior year. But to your point, because you're going through and you're a finance student, I'm sure everybody talks about it. But outside of that bubble, I would almost guarantee you that nobody does.
Well, and I guess to kind of add to that, to build on what Shane, what you were saying there, when you're 22 to 30 years old, you've got a lot of competing interests for your money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think, obviously you're absolutely right. And we try to get this home to people. The earlier you start, the more compounding works for you, the bigger the returns. But there's also something to be said about investing in yourself when you're 23 years old, too. And whether that's buying a house, starting a family, getting more education, you can't discount those things. So what I guess my perspective on it would be to just, if you can get started doing something early, that's great. but don't make it be the be all and end all, which I think you were getting at there. If all your money's locked up in your 401k at work, or in your in an IRA where you're invested in the stock market, that's great, but then it does make it hard to buy a house or do other things. So find that like middle ground, right?
Yeah, I think that balance is very important. I'm not gonna sit here and advocate for everyone to, live at home in their mom's basement and put every single dime into an investment account, but in the same point, I wouldn't advocate for someone to spend every dollar that they make. So I think
Love it.
just finding that middle balance is between either between you and yourself, or if you want to seek out an advisor, then that's something that they can help with.
Well, I think that's a great, balance is huge. And I think of it in terms of like the reason we do goal based planning is, and I've said this probably 100 times on this podcast, if it was all about maximizing wealth, we'd tell everybody to live in their mom's basement, invest everything, buy nothing, right? Like live as cheaply as possible, save
Yeah.
and invest everything, and don't worry about it, right? But the reality is, if you think about saving for retirement, yes, that's great, but it's 40 years away from then. So that's a long time to have a lot of enjoyment. And if you put everything towards saving and investing for retirement, you're missing out on 40 of what are probably some of the best years of your life, right? Like you don't want that either. So how do we balance
Right.
that future need with, hey, we want to buy a house someday. Hey, we want to get married, have kids, whatever it is.
Yeah. I agree with that. And my next point is also just like, what do you want your retirement to look like? Obviously, as a 22-year-old, you don't really know, but I feel like some people do also know it is that if they, want to have extravagant things and, have a nice lifestyle and whatever and have a bunch of money, well, you might need to save a lot when you're working versus
Hmm.
somebody who just wants to be content and maybe take a couple vacations a year. Well, that person might not have to save a lot, so then they could enjoy more as they're younger. So it's all about what you want personality wise as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And how I would kind of translate that as well is like, you're 20 years old. Maybe you find a job that you absolutely love and it doesn't pay a whole lot and you don't get great benefits for it. But if you love it and you don't ever want to stop doing it, then maybe you don't need to save as much for retirement, right? Like
Right.
maybe retiring at 70 or later makes a ton of sense for you because you love what you're doing. Like we have that conversation around here a lot.
Well, one thing I think you'll find too, Shane, like you're basically going to be working in a laboratory of different retirements, right? Every
Mhm.
client you're going to meet, you're going to learn something from about how you want the rest of your life to work. Whether it's good or bad, you're going to see some people that get a big kick out of saving as much as they can and watching their accounts grow, and that works for them and makes them happy, so they're not worried about how much they spend. You're going to have other people that you're going to look at and think, boy, I don't want to have the stresses that they have when I'm 65 because I haven't saved enough. You're going to get to see all that firsthand. And I know, my own, when I was your age, I was still putting diapers on a credit card for our daughter, and not sure where our next paycheck was going to come from. And it was, starting in this industry probably was the key thing for me to get that part straightened out. But then you also see it evolve into, I don't want to be the person that has this huge IRA when I'm 90 years old and hasn't had any fun either. So, um, it's occupational hazard, but occupational good things at the same time.
Mhm. What else is on your list there, Mr. Shane?
Well, we could go through kind of a little educational. Uh,
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
educate the people.
we could talk about the differences in the rules and tax implications of the Roth IRA versus a 401k versus a taxable account.
All right. What do you got for us?
Okay. Well, should we all take one? I guess.
Let's do it. You pick
I
your favorite, and I will leave Dave with
Okay.
the least favorite.
Okay,
All right. Well, I'll
that
start
tracks.
first with I guess my favorite, the Roth IRA. So it's a current contribution max of 7,000 a year if you're over, is it 50, right, for the catch up? 50 years old?
Yes.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think so. After 50, it's 8,000 per year, and that does adjust with inflation. So every couple of years, I think it goes up by $500.
Mhm.
So the contributions that you put in a Roth IRA are after tax. So you do pay taxes when you before you put the money in, but then when you pull the money out, it is tax free, and you also get no tax deduction, so no reduction in your tax for that year that you contribute. Um, and I think it's a very useful thing because as you're young, you're probably not investing a ton of money. So I feel as though, and this kind of segues into my next question with for you guys is, if you have a recent graduate who's not in their peak earning because it's their first couple of years, they're as of now they're probably sitting in that 10 to 12% tax bracket. Would you recommend them paying or not paying, contributing to their Roth over a retirement account?
Definitely in that situation. If you're able to save and you're in that low of a tax bracket, you're never going to be in a lower tax bracket, most
Mm-hmm.
likely.
Hmm.
And at some point that'll cross, hopefully, as your earnings grow and your tax situation while you're working grows, there'll be a point where it makes sense to switch from a Roth. But as long as you qualify to add money to a Roth or are in a 401k plan that has a Roth, that's paying that 10 or 12% now. You may be in a similar tax bracket in retirement, but probably not a lower one. Um,
Yeah. The
and there,
only
Go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead, Dave. I was just going to say the only caveat to that being if you are getting matching funds from your employer, you always want to get your matching funds, right? And so you get a lot of people who are like, well, I got to put money in my Roth and ignore the fact that they're getting free money from their employer is always a downside, right? You
Uh,
always want to take your free money.
Yeah, well, but you can put most 401k plans now will allow for Roth. So I guess I wasn't
Correct. Yes.
wasn't not to argue with you, Nick, but I wasn't necessarily advocating that you just use a Roth IRA, but
No, I
more
just
the
wanted to make sure it
Roth
was clear.
form.
Yeah, I got you.
Right, right, yeah, good.
And I guess a couple more things and why I would choose this as my favorite investment vehicle is the flexibility that you have. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick and Dave, but I found online that you can withdraw your contributions at any time, tax free and penalty free. Um, so obviously, if you're young and you invest in your Roth IRA, and then you get into your maybe late 20s and you want to purchase a house, you have a stockpile of cash in your contributions. You can't take the earnings out without penalty, but you can pull from that contributions, and maybe that's your down payment or part of your down payment. Um, and another interesting caveat of the Roth IRAs is you can use 529 plans to fund a Roth IRA up to, I found online, $35,000 over your lifetime. Those still have to comply with annual contributions, so you can't put 35,000 in one year. But if there's a situation where maybe your parents saved for college and you decided to go maybe the trade school route or not college at all, and they have that money saved set aside for you to go to college and you never used it, you can roll that into your Roth and start your investing journey.
Yeah, that's a brand new thing this year.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was this year that started. In fact, I think a few 529 custodians are still figuring out the technicalities of how to do it, but that's kind of an exciting opportunity there for some folks. And yes, from a Roth IRA, you can withdraw your contributions tax free and penalty free, and that gives you some flexibility in terms of being able to use those funds for a down payment or some other usage later in life. It does mean you have to make appropriate investment decisions within your IRA too. So, but that's definitely a possibility, and I think raises the appeal for young folks like yourself.
For sure. Anything else about Roth IRAs that's got you excited, Shane?
I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Yep, that's
I mean, great, powerful tools, whether it's, and we kind of alluded to it as well, but there's both the Roth IRA and the Roth 401k, which essentially the rules are very similar. It's all about, how the taxes are paid and when the taxes are paid. But most 401k plans nowadays have the ability for you to make Roth contributions. So, speaking of 401ks, I know that's kind of next on your list. And, they are, for the most part, pre-tax contributions other than the Roth. But there's also the benefit of a 401k plan through your employer is your contribution limits are much higher. So where you can only contribute $7,000 to a Roth IRA, you can do, Dave's going to correct my math here, 23,000 this year. Is that what it is for 401k plans? That's your contribution
so.
plus your
Yeah.
employer can contribute in addition to that, like we talked about. And that's one of the big benefits of these plans is a lot of times you get employer contributions, and sometimes they can be very, very lucrative. We've seen, for example, at Michigan State University, who we work with a lot of their folks, it's a 2-for-1 contribution, right? So that for every dollar you put in, they put in 2. Not all plans are quite that generous, but even if your plan's giving you something, right? Even if it's 25 cents on the dollar, that's still free, guaranteed 25% rate of return for every dollar you put in. So we always want to make sure we're taking advantage of those. One of the questions that I get, especially from young people as well, is let's say my company has a 4% match. And so I'm putting 4% in. What do I do with percent number 5, right? And this is where it's, does that money go into a Roth IRA? Do I keep putting it in the 401k? And there's a lot of pros and cons around why you would want to do one thing over the other. The first thing that I would think of is I would think of it in terms of like the behavioral finance side of things. It's probably really easy for you to go into your 401k plan and hit the up button on your contribution to 5 and let somebody else take care of all of that for you, right? Different than having an IRA and being disciplined enough to transfer money to that IRA on a monthly basis, right? So the ease of use definitely kind of favors the 401k. The flip side of that is if you feel like you're the type of person that wouldn't have any issues setting up regular contributions to your IRA from your bank account after you get paid, then it's just a matter of thinking through like not all 401k plans are created equal. And so some of the things that I would think about is what are the fees of my 401k plan, right? Like the expense ratios of the funds, the availability of the funds. Do I have a few choices that I don't really like? And are they expensive? Because in an IRA, you can pretty much invest into kind of whatever you want for the most part, especially when you start getting some of these bigger custodians like Fidelity and Schwab and things like that, right? I mean, there is some caveats, but for the most
some things
part,
we wish you couldn't invest in.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So those are kind of some of the decision-making processes and the things that I would think about as a 22-year-old. First and foremost in a 401k, get your company match, and then kind of think of it from there.
I would add one thing to that. I would echo everything Nick said, but with one addition is that let's say you're in a situation where you can save 4% of your income, but you think you can save 6, or you're not sure what you can do every month. Then using the 401k for the set amount that you can save is a good behavioral way to do it. But play a game where you try to save more into your savings account, and then because with the IRA option, you can do it as a lump sum up until you file your taxes. So you can kind of play that. Hey, my set savings goes into my 401k. If I'm if things work out and I can save more, I can throw that into the IRA at the end of the year. That's
Yeah,
worked
I
well
love
for.
that. And I also would add to that, not everybody gets paid like consistently. So that if you
Regularly.
have
Yeah.
fluctuating income, it's, like, hey, let's get 4%. And then if my income fluctuates the right way and I have extra, right. And, or like bonuses, things like that,
Yeah.
peeling off a piece of your bonus to add to an IRA makes a lot of sense too.
Shane, the main takeaway here is if you ask two CFPs what you think is a simple question, you're going to get a long-winded, somewhat contradictory explanation that usually ends in "it depends."
Yep. Fair point. Fair point. So the last account that you had listed here, Shane, was the in just a general investment account, brokerage account, taxable account. There's a million names for these. So I'm going to let Mr. Shotwell tell us kind of how those work and what he likes to call them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just calling it an after-tax investment account is usually the easiest way to talk about it. Brokerage account you hear quite often. So, for a young saver, I think the things that we've just talked about are probably the better option if you qualify for a Roth because of the flexibility that it gives you. If that money does end up sticking around, you don't need it when you're 30 for a down payment on a house or what have you. That's money that's going to grow tax free for retirement. If you have maxed out your IRA and 401k options, or if you are in a situation where you're going to need a little more flexibility around the investments, an after tax investment account can be a good option. So there you put the money in with no tax benefit. If you leave the investments as they are, you're going to pay taxes on the income that they produce, but not necessarily the growth. So if it's a uh, interest bearing investment like bond funds, that would be taxed as income. Or you can use municipal, but see here we get into the murky, all the different permutations, right? But you can use municipal bond funds that produce tax free interest. And if you're in a higher tax bracket, that is a good option. Um, the stock funds that you have are likely to produce dividends. And if you by the right. So when we invest for clients in one of these accounts, we make sure that the funds that we're using are going to not create tax problems in and of themselves. We tend to use funds that are going to have qualified dividends, which are taxed at a lower rate than your income tax bracket generally. We tend to use those municipal bond funds that are going to create tax free interest, but just be aware you're going to get a 1099 at the end of the year for anything that has gone on in that account that's taxable. That's why we kind of like the Roth, but that again has those limits on how much you can put in and you've got to qualify for it. So I like to look at these after tax investments accounts as more of the spillover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to circle around on that I see, now we've spun this around to Dave and I just dropping a bunch of knowledge on you, Shane. See, this is how the podcast
Yeah,
works.
look out, here it comes.
So if I was starting my career, one of the mistakes that I see people make, or the things that I see them not pay attention to financially, is a lot of times we get so wrapped up into how much is an employer going to pay me, we forget about the employee benefit side of things, right? And so a $60,000 salary in one institution, it doesn't equal a $60,000 salary somewhere else when it comes to what are the benefits, right? Like the cost that employers are willing to pay for health insurance, what their retirement match is, the disability insurance that they're going to give you. These are all things that are very valuable. And a lot of times we just want to look at, well, what's the salary, and not necessarily look at what's the total package. And I used to get very frustrated when I worked at the credit union because a lot of the employees just wanted to make more money and were willing to like give up very valuable benefits to do that.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things that if you just focus on what the salary is, sometimes you miss what could be a $20,000-$30,000 benefits package. So I would encourage you as you're evaluating offers and as your friends are to look at what those benefit packages are and how much value there is baked into some of those things, and ask those questions because a lot of people don't even ask.
Yeah. The one of the banks I worked for actually gave us an annual statement at the end of the year that showed what your salary was plus the value of your particular benefits. And the first time I was like, boy, that seems kind of weird, or what are they getting at here? But it actually was a pretty useful little tool to look at every year and say, oh yeah, my health insurance is worth this, and that needs to be added to my salary because they were paying the premiums, and my 401k contribution and my pension contribution, and those things add up pretty significantly.
Yeah.
So Nick's point is a good one. It's not always that easy where they're going to give you a one-page summary, but that's good.
Yeah.
So
Other questions that you have for us? Other things you want to point out, Shane? This is your show today, my friend.
I don't have anything else.
I, I, our job here is done, Dave.
nailed it. Nailed it. As usual.
Shane has everything he needs to go on and conquer the world, which I have no
I
doubt that
love
he
it.
will.
Yep. We expect great things from you, Shane.
I
That's right.
appreciate it.
To our listeners, if you have any questions or thoughts about potentially your kids or friends going out and starting their careers, feel free to shoot us an email at info@srbadvisors.com. As I hopefully you can tell, we love imparting knowledge on the next generation around here. So happy to help. Shane, Dave, it's been a pleasure.
It was fun, guys.